everybody, now we're going to have a look at income elasticity of demand. So this is another elasticity, and this one is looking at the responsiveness of demand for a product to a change in income. So you're looking at the individual, what's going to happen to how much of something they demand when their income changes. And the formula for this, we're now getting the hang of how to do these formulas. Capital Y is shorthand for income. Income elasticity of demand is percentage change of, remember demand or supply is always on the top line. This elasticity is about demand. So percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by, the other factor here is income, the percentage change in income. So you can do any calculations using that formula. If you wanted to illustrate this in a diagram, you'd be looking at how the quantity demanded is changing in relation to income changing. If as your quantity demanded increases, the amount being demanded decreases, this would mean you've got a negative correlation. So it means as income goes up, quantity demanded goes down. So you can see here, when income is higher, the quantity demanded is lower. And this would be an inferior good. So this is something where when your income goes up, you don't want as much of it. And an example of this would be bus travel. Because generally speaking, when people's incomes go up, they prefer to have their own car or to take a taxi or perhaps to take the tube in London. So as their income goes up, the demand for this type of product goes down. Bus travel would be one thing. And another one would be a savers range in a supermarket. So if you can get the very basic pasta or the very basic cereal, something like that, that's very cheap, if your income goes up, you'll demand less of it. These are inferior goods, and it's a negative correlation between income and quantity demanded. You can also have a positive correlation, and this would mean that, don't be confused by this, by the way, the demand curve is going upwards, which to us seems very alien and wrong, but this is because our axes are income and quantity, in this case being demanded. So this is showing that as your income goes up, your quantity demanded also goes up. You can see at higher incomes, the quantity demanded is higher. And this is what happens with most things. These are normal goods. So this is showing the correlation for a normal good. So for example, you could say something like most clothes. You could say it about jewellery as well. So as people's incomes go up, they demand more clothes. As people's incomes go up, they demand more jewellery. These are normal goods, and most goods are like this. And you can see here, if it's an inferior good, it's a negative correlation. The value will be negative. If it's a normal good, it's a positive correlation. These are both going up, they're doing the same thing. This is a positive value, so when we end up with our values. So you can see now, when you work out a YED calculation, you're going to end up with a number, and the number will tell you whether it's an inferior good, if it's a negative value, or if it's a normal good, if it's a positive value. And we also know that we can look at things to decide whether, if they're less than 1, we know that the value is showing us that it's inelastic. And if it's greater than 1, we know that the value is elastic. So we can now tell a lot of things just by giving a YED figure. We can work out lots about the product. So an example would be if our YED is equal to negative 1.2. So the first thing we can tell here, because it's a negative value, we know that it's an inferior good. And because the value is greater than 1, we know that it must be elastic. So this will mean that a percentage change in income causes a smaller percentage change in quantity demanded. And we also know, because it's inferior good, as income goes up, quantity demanded will go down. So you can tell a lot just from your YED figure about the product. If we do another example, you could pause the video here to see if you can work it out for yourself. If we say that the YED is equal to plus 2.4, this would mean, because it's positive, it's a normal good. As income goes up, quantity demanded goes up. Because it's greater than 1, we know that it's elastic. If we look at just a couple more, if your YED is 0.3, we know that it will be, we know it's a positive value. We don't have a negative. So it's a normal good. And we know that it's inelastic because it's less than 1. And remember that you're ignoring your positive sign or your negative sign to see whether it's elastic or inelastic. Last one, if your YED is negative 0.01, it's negative, so we know it's an inferior good. And because, cover up the negative, this is less than 1, so we know that again this is inelastic. And interestingly, in this case it's nearly 0, and if it's 0 it would be perfectly inelastic, but it's not quite 0. So this is how you can look at curves to see if you did have income on one axis and quantity on the other. You can see the correlation between income and quantity demanded. You can see whether it's an inferior good or a normal good. And then you can look at different values, and from the different values you can work out, is it a normal good or an inferior good, and is the YED elastic or inelastic.